Welcome to the Funeral Channel Network, and specifically, welcome to today's deep dive. When we think about estate planning or really just what happens after we're gone, our minds almost inevitably go straight to the physical world, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a very tangible thought process. You picture the family home,
Hmm.
or you think about who gets the vintage car in the garage.
Yeah, or who gets the good china? Like, you picture someone having to physically climb up into the attic, pull down those really heavy, dusty cardboard boxes, and sort through old sweaters.
All right, and
Yeah.
faded photo albums.
Yeah.
And even though that process is, you know, emotionally exhausting for a grieving family, there is a comforting clarity to it.
Exactly. You can touch a sweater. You can physically hand a set of metal house keys to your sibling. It's an exchange of matter in the real world. I mean, a chair is a chair. A box is a box.
The rules of physics apply.
Yeah.
And because of that, the rules of inheritance just make intuitive sense to our human brains. It's entirely grounded in the physical reality that we've evolved to understand.
Yeah.
Even in the midst of devastating emotional loss, the physical objects provide an anchor. You know exactly what you're dealing with because it occupies physical space.
Right. If you want to throw away a physical photograph, you put it in a trash can. If you want to keep it, you put it in a frame.
Exactly. The object behaves exactly as you expect it to.
But then you step into the digital realm, and suddenly that entire physical rule book, all those intuitive laws of possession that we've relied on for centuries, they're just completely thrown out the window.
They really are. We're looking at a landscape of assets and memories that are entirely invisible.
Right. They have no mass, they occupy no physical space in your living room, yet they are quite literally everywhere at once. You can access them from any glowing screen on the planet.
It's a huge shift.
So we are taking on a mission today for you, the listener. A mission that, honestly, most of us try very, very hard to avoid thinking about. We're talking about our digital legacy.
It's a heavy topic, definitely.
It is. Specifically, we are diving deep into the architecture of what happens to a Facebook account after death. And we're drawing some really profound insights from the work being done over at the funeral program site.
Yeah, they are actively mapping out how traditional mourning intersects with this entirely new digital reality.
Right. Because avoiding the reality of our digital permanence, it doesn't make it go away.
Not at all. In fact, ignoring it usually just compounds the logistical and emotional difficulty for the people we ultimately leave behind.
That is exactly why we're doing this. In our modern age, social media is the town square. It's where we connect, debate, share our milestones, and effectively, it's where we store the minute-by-minute narrative of our life stories.
Yeah, our digital footprint is massive.
So what happens to that massive, sprawling, globally accessible footprint when your physical journey ends?
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because having this knowledge right now, today, is the ultimate shortcut to being well-informed. And more importantly, it's how you spare your loved ones from falling into a, honestly, Kafkaesque administrative nightmare while they're simply trying to grieve.
So true.
If we look back even just 20 or 30 years, end-of-life planning was strictly about wills, financial trusts, physical estates. It was about notarized paper documents stored securely in a bank.
The safety deposit box, yeah.
Exactly. But now, managing an online presence is a critical, unavoidable part of the process. Our digital presence has grown to the point where it's inextricably linked to our core identity.
You really can't claim to have a complete end-of-life plan today without addressing the digital components. And when we look at the sheer scale of the platform we're discussing today, we're talking about the primary social archive for billions of human beings.
Billions. And that scale brings us right to the first major fork in the road. When a user passes away, this massive infrastructure essentially provides two primary mutually exclusive options.
All right, it's a very stark, very binary fork in the digital road. You have memorialization on one side and you have complete account deletion on the other.
There really is no middle ground here.
Then,
And it is vital to understand that these two paths serve entirely different emotional, psychological, and practical purposes. We can't view these as just arbitrary software settings buried in a drop-down menu somewhere.
right, they're profound philosophical choices.
Exactly. They are profound choices about how someone's memory exists in the public sphere. They reflect the ultimate wishes of the deceased. Or, if those wishes weren't made clear, they become incredibly difficult, permanent decisions placed upon the grieving family.
I want to focus on the sheer weight of that binary choice because it really mirrors the choices families face with physical property, but with a strange technological rigidity to it.
How do you mean?
Well, it feels a bit like the difference between deciding to keep a family home exactly as it was, leaving the pictures on the walls, keeping the furniture in place so people can visit, versus making the really tough call to sell the house, bulldoze the property, and essentially salt the earth.
That's a really powerful analogy.
But here's where I struggle with this and where I kind of want to push back a bit on the platform's design. Is the binary nature of these two options, memorialize forever or delete forever, is that too rigid for the messy reality of human grief?
It's a fair question.
Because grief isn't binary. It ebbs and flows. It changes over years and decades. Why does the digital solution have to be so incredibly black and white? Why can't there be like a spectrum?
That is the exact tension at the heart of this entire system. What's fascinating here is that we are watching a massive global technology platform attempt to build infrastructure for human mourning.
Yeah.
And when you're dealing with billions of active users, platforms are forced by the laws of computing and database management to create standardized, scalable procedures. They simply cannot offer a bespoke, sliding scale of grief management for every individual account.
Right. They can't say, we'll leave it up for a year and then fade the photos by 20% and then only allow close friends to comment on Tuesdays.
Exactly. The architecture of a global network requires discrete states, active, memorialized, or deleted.
Because anything else would require an army of human beings manually moderating the nuances of 3 billion people's grief.
Precisely. The binary choice forces us to confront our cultural attitudes toward remembrance in a very user interface-driven way.
Yeah.
The rigidity you're pointing out is born out of strict technical necessity, but it has massive emotional ramifications for the users experiencing it. The database requires a 1 or a 0, but human memory operates in a million shades of gray.
It really does. It's like we are being forced to check a box on a legal form dictating how our entire existence is to be remembered.
Yeah.
And to truly grasp what that choice means, I think we have to look really closely at the mechanics of the first option. Let's dig into memorialization.
Okay, let's do it.
The concept here is turning the active dynamic profile into a static place of remembrance. And there are some very specific, immediate mechanics that kick in the exact second an account transitions into the state.
The transition is immediate, it's system-wide, and it fundamentally alters the nature of that digital space. The most visible change, the immediate visual cue to the network, is that the word remembering is permanently appended next to the person's name on their profile.
Which, from a design perspective, is such a simple UI change. I mean, it's just one single word. But the emotional gravity it carries is staggering.
It really is.
The addition of remembering changes the entire context of the page in a millisecond. It's a digital status update of the most permanent kind.
Right.
It signals to anyone landing on that page, whether they're a close friend or an old high school acquaintance looking them up 10 years later, this is no longer a living feed. This is a historical site. The person you are looking for is gone.
It acts as a necessary digital boundary. Without that visual cue, you end up with a very jarring, often painful experience of algorithms suggesting you invite a deceased friend to an event.
Oh, that's the worst.
Or, prompting you to wish them a happy birthday. By tagging the account with remembering, the platform not only informs the human visitors, but it also instructs its own internal algorithms to stop treating this profile as an active node.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the account is removed from birthday reminders, it stops showing up in people you may know suggestions, and it ceases to trigger those automated pings that can be so deeply upsetting to a grieving family.
Right. The algorithm needs to be told that the status has changed, so it stops trying to extract engagement from a ghost.
Exactly.
Now, beyond the algorithmic shift, the actual human connections remain. Friends and family can continue to view the profile, they can share memories, and they can post tributes on the timeline. It preserves the network.
Yes, the connections that this person spent a decade building remain intact, allowing the community to gather.
But there is a crucial technical caveat here that I think is so easily overlooked, and it blew my mind when I realized the implications. The account remains visible based strictly on the original privacy settings that the user set while they were alive.
This is perhaps the most ethically interesting design choice the platform made. It is a mechanism designed entirely around preserving the user's ultimate agency.
Let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this correctly. This means that the choices you are making today right now on your phone about your privacy settings, who can see your posts, who can view your photos, those are effectively the settings you are locking in for eternity.
That's exactly what it means.
So if you are a deeply private person who has locked down your profile so that only a tight circle of 50 close friends can see your updates, you remain a private person in death. That digital wall stays up permanently.
Yes.
Conversely, if you are a very public person, like a prolific oversharer who leaves every photo album open to the public, your memorial remains a sprawling public square that anyone on Earth can wander into.
Exactly. The platform is taking a definitive stance here.
Mm-hmm.
They are essentially saying, we will not retroactively alter the boundaries you deliberately set while you were alive, regardless of who is asking. If you don't want strangers viewing your vacation photos in life,
Yeah.
the platform will not suddenly open those albums to the public in death just because you're gone. It freezes the account's privacy posture in amber. It honors the digital boundaries you establish.
I love that analogy, freezing in an amber. It perfectly captures the preservation aspect. It actually makes me think of a museum exhibit.
A museum exhibit.
Yeah, think about when you go to a major art museum and look at a retrospective of an artist who has passed away. The paintings are there, they are beautiful, but they are locked behind glass or separated from you by those little velvet ropes.
Right.
You absolutely cannot walk up with a paintbrush and add a new stroke to the artist's canvas. The body of work is finished. It is complete.
That's very true.
But you can gather around it. You can appreciate it with other people. You can discuss the impact of the art. And you can leave a deeply personal message in the guestbook on your way out. That is exactly what memorialization feels like to me.
Mhm.
It's a locked exhibit where the community can still gather to mourn and reflect.
That is a highly accurate and useful way to visualize the architecture. The lock behind glass aspect is not just a metaphor. It is the literal technical reality.
Because you can't log in, right?
Exactly. Memorialized accounts have incredibly strict, unbreakable restrictions coded into them. Primarily, no one can log into the account. Ever. Does not matter if you have the username and the password.
Wow, even with the password.
Even with the password. Once that account state shifts to memorialized, the login portal is sealed. And because no one can log in, it cannot be used to post new content as the original user.
Which honestly sounds like a massive relief.
It provides immense psychological comfort to the grieving network because it guarantees the absolute integrity of the person's digital identity.
Right, because if someone else logged in, it would be weird.
Exactly. If the platform allowed someone else to log in, there's always the risk of the account suddenly posting a spam link because it was compromised, or a well-meaning family member taking it over and speaking in the first person as the deceased.
Oh, that would be incredibly unsettling for everyone else in the network.
Deeply unsettling. So, by sealing the login, the platform creates a safe, immutable, bounded space for remembrance. The person's voice remains their own, definitively ending on the day they passed.
But that hard boundary, the fact that absolutely no one can log in, not even a spouse, it also creates a bit of a vacuum, doesn't it?
In what way?
Well, if the account is locked behind glass, who cleans up the guestbook? Who makes sure the museum exhibit actually looks the way it should? Because while the account is locked from a functional login perspective, it isn't entirely unmanaged.
That's true.
It can't just be abandoned to the digital elements. And that brings us directly to a really fascinating and fairly recent evolution in this space, the concept of the legacy contact.
Yes. The legacy contact is the necessary bridge between the frozen, amber-encased account and the dynamic, ongoing needs of the grieving community.
A vital role.
It is. A legacy contact is a specific individual chosen by the account holder before death. Their job is to act as the custodian of the memorialized profile. However, and this is crucial for people to understand, before they assign this role, they do so with very specific, highly limited administrative powers.
Right. They aren't given the keys to the entire house. They're given a very specific set of tools to maintain the front yard.
That's a great way to put it.
Let's break down those powers because they are deliberately narrow. The legacy contact can do three main things. They can accept new friend requests on behalf of the memorialized account, they can update the profile picture and the cover photo, and they can pin tribute posts to the very top of the timeline. That's essentially the toolkit.
Let's analyze why the platform engineers chose those specific powers, because nothing in this UI is accidental.
Okay, let's look at friend requests first.
Right. Accepting friend requests allows the deceased community to continue gathering, accommodating the reality that news of a death travels at different speeds.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sometimes people don't find out for months.
Exactly. Perhaps an old college roommate or a former colleague hears about the passing 6 months later and wants to access the memorial page to read what happened or leave a tribute.
And if they weren't already friends on the platform, they might be blocked by the privacy settings?
Precisely. If the account's original privacy settings required a mutual friend connection to see the timeline, that old roommate would be locked out. The legacy contact can step in, accept the request, and facilitate that connection.
So they act as a bouncer for the museum, essentially.
Yes, allowing the mourning process to expand to those who legitimately need it while keeping bad actors out.
And the second power pinning tribute post that is purely about curation and managing the emotional flow of the page, right?
Absolutely.
It allows the legacy contact to take a beautifully written eulogy posted by a sibling or a really touching photo collage and ensure it stays anchored at the top of the page for everyone to see.
Without that power, the most profound tributes would just get algorithmically buried under hundreds of shorter one-line thinking of you messages. It's curating the visual experience of the grief.
And updating the profile picture makes sense too. Maybe the last photo the person had up was a silly meme and the family wants something more dignified for the memorial.
Right. But, crucially, they cannot make major changes to the deep past of the account. They can't go back to 2012 and start deleting embarrassing photos.
Exactly. They are custodians, not editors. They are groundskeepers, not the architect. They cannot rewrite the person's history.
That's the fundamental limit.
But there is another restriction placed on the legacy contact that is perhaps the most heavily debated, emotionally fraught aspect of this entire digital ecosystem.
I know exactly where you're going with this.
Yeah. Here's where it gets really interesting, and frankly, where a lot of people get incredibly frustrated. The legacy contact, the person you have explicitly chosen legally to be the trusted custodian of your digital afterlife, cannot read your private messages.
That's correct.
They have zero access to your direct messages, your messenger history, your private inbox, none. Now, I have to play devil's advocate here because from a purely human perspective, this feels deeply counterintuitive.
I hear this all the time.
Right. If I trust my spouse or my sibling enough to name them my digital executor, why wouldn't I want them to have full access? Isn't it incredibly painful for a grieving widow or widower to be explicitly technologically locked out of their partner's final conversations?
It can be agonizing for them.
Maybe they're frantically looking for a specific photo that was sent in a message, or they're trying to piece together a timeline, or honestly, maybe they just desperately want the comfort of reading their deceased partner's words. Why is the platform so rigidly, inflexibly opposed to granting that access to the one person the user trusted most?
It is a phenomenal question, and it cuts to the core of how we misunderstand digital communication. Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we see that this is a fascinating collision course intersection of user privacy and post-mortem rights. We have been conditioned by the physical world to view our digital accounts as our sole individual property.
Like a diary kept in a nightstand.
Exactly, like a physical diary. If you die, your spouse inherits the nightstand, they find the diary, and they can read it. It belongs to them now.
Right.
But a platform like Facebook has to consider all parties involved in a networked data exchange. When you send a private direct message, there is an expectation of privacy not just for you, the sender, but crucially for the person on the other end of that digital conversation.
Wow. Okay, wait, stop right there. I genuinely had not thought about it from the perspective of the other person in the chat. My brain was completely focused on the deceased and the spouse.
It is a very common blind spot. But think about the implications. Let's say a friend came to you in confidence via direct message to discuss a deeply personal struggle.
Like a medical diagnosis or something?
Right? A medical diagnosis, a failing marriage, a financial crisis. They shared that information with you under the strict, assumed contract that the conversation was securely permanently between the two of you.
Oh, man.
If the platform were to suddenly grant your legacy contact access to your entire inbox upon your death, they would simultaneously be violating the privacy of every single person who ever confided in you.
That is a profound paradigm shift.
They would be exposing the secrets of the living to appease the grief of the family.
Facebook is essentially acting as the guardian of the living network's privacy.
Precisely. The absolute refusal to expose private direct messages, even to a legally designated legacy contact, even if the family petitions the company, highlights a very modern, very firm ethical principle in tech.
Which is?
Digital privacy survives death. The platform has mathematically calculated that the sanctity of a private channel, the trust of the living user base, fundamentally outweighs the desires or the convenience of the grieving family.
That is a wild thing to think about. Your digital privacy doesn't die when you do because your digital footprint is inherently, permanently intertwined with the digital footprints of everyone you ever interacted with.
Yes, it's a vast web, not a single isolated thread.
You can't just pull one thread without unraveling the privacy of 100 other people. So the legacy contact gets the keys to the public squares, the timeline, the profile picture, the friend list, but the private vaults, the direct messages, are sealed. And they are sealed forever.
Sealed and cryptographically inaccessible. It's a hard, non-negotiable line drawn by the terms of service to protect the integrity of the broader network.
Okay, so we have just spent a massive amount of time exploring this deeply nuanced, highly structured system of memorialization, amber-frozen privacy settings, and custodial legacy contacts.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But what if a listener is sitting there thinking, this all sounds like way too much ongoing maintenance? What if the idea of leaving a digital museum behind just doesn't sit right with you? Maybe you don't want a bouncer at the door of your memorial.
That's a perfectly valid stance.
Well, there is a completely different route you can take, a much more brutal but perhaps cleaner route.
Yes. The system requires binary inputs. If you do not choose to maintain the data structure through memorialization, the second primary option is permanent deletion.
Permanent deletion. Just saying the phrase out loud has so much gravity to it.
It does.
In this scenario, the account is completely, entirely removed from the platform. All the photos you ever uploaded, every post you ever made, every comment, every piece of data associated with your identity is permanently erased from the servers.
And it absolutely cannot be recovered. It is the absolute polar opposite of memorialization.
It really is.
It is the digital equivalent of a hard stop, a zeroing out of the ledger. Where memorialization attempts to preserve a static snapshot of the person's social identity for the benefit of the community, deletion aggressively and systematically dismantles it. It is absolute, and crucially, it is irreversible. Once the command is executed and the data is scrubbed from the active servers and the backup drives, there is no undo button. There is no customer service representative who can stitch your digital life back together. It's gone.
And people often choose this option in advance for very specific, deeply personal reasons, right?
Yeah.
Primarily revolving around concepts of absolute privacy and total closure.
Exactly.
I keep coming back to physical analogies because I think it's the only way our human brains can really process this concept of digital permanence, or in this case, deliberate digital impermanence.
There's very helpful framing devices.
If memorialization is like turning the family home into a curated museum, permanent deletion is like scattering ashes to the wind over the ocean.
That's exactly it.
It is an active, intentional choice to return to the void. You are deciding, while you are still alive, to leave absolutely no interactive trace behind. You are taking your toys and leaving the sandbox entirely.
The scattering of ashes analogy is very apt because it implies a return to nothingness. In an era where we are constantly told that our data will inevitably outlive us, that the internet never forgets.
Right, that our digital ghosts will be mined for advertising data into eternity.
Exactly. Making a proactive choice for total digital deletion is a surprisingly powerful act of reclaiming agency.
It's taking the control back.
Yes. It ensures that your data doesn't sit dormant on a remote server farm in Nevada, vulnerable to future platform changes, algorithm shifts, or unseen security breaches 20 years from now. It is a definitive engineered end to your digital footprint.
And beyond the privacy aspect, the emotional reasons for choosing deletion are just as powerful. I can easily imagine that for some families, having a lingering, interactive digital ghost of their loved one out there in the ether is just too much to bear.
It can be re-traumatizing.
Imagine you're trying to move on from a devastating loss, and suddenly an algorithm hiccups and suggests your deceased husband as someone you could reconnect with, or his face pops up in a peripheral search result. That could be an agonizing, daily open wound.
Exactly. We must acknowledge that human mourning is incredibly diverse. For some families, the comfort of a memorial page, that digital space to visit, is undeniable and vital to their healing process.
Yeah, they need that anchor.
But for others, the constant digital reminder, the overwhelming presence of an absence, is simply too painful. Deletion caters to the psychological need for a clean break.
It removes the artifact.
Yes. It recognizes that sometimes the healthiest, most necessary way for a community to move forward is to allow the digital presence to cease entirely alongside the physical one. It removes the artifacts so the healing can focus on the memory rather than the data.
So we have these two incredibly distinct paths laid out before us. You either build the enduring digital monument, or you scatter the digital ashes to the wind.
The one or the zero.
But having laid out the philosophy, the mechanics of what these paths are, the conversation logically has to shift to the logistics, the real-world application.
This is where it gets complicated.
How do we actually make this happen? How are these paths chosen? And more importantly, how are they rigidly enforced by the platform? Because this isn't just about what you philosophically want, it's about your family having to navigate a massive, faceless corporate bureaucracy during literally one of the worst, most chaotic moments of their lives.
The logistics of legacy are where these high-level philosophical choices violently meet cold, hard, automated administrative reality.
Right.
This is where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
The ecosystem essentially forces this down into two distinct approaches. The proactive approach, which is entirely within the user's control, and the reactive approach, which places the entire burden on the survivors.
Let's start with the proactive approach, because honestly, reading through the mechanics of this, it sounds remarkably simple if you just take the time to do it while you are still here and breathing.
It is incredibly simple.
The platform allows users to set these exact preferences in advance directly via their account settings. You can navigate into the security menus, and you can literally just click a radio button to explicitly choose whether you want your account to default to memorialization or permanent deletion upon your death.
Just a few clicks.
And right there, in the same menu, you can type in the name of your legacy contact and assign them the role. It takes, what, maybe 30 to 60 seconds of your time?
It is remarkably simple, yes.
Hmm.
By utilizing the proactive approach, you are essentially writing a legally binding digital micro-will that the platform's automated systems can execute without any friction.
You're telling the code exactly what to do.
You are. But the reality is that human beings are notoriously bad at contemplating their own mortality, especially when scrolling through a social media feed. The vast, overwhelming majority of users never touch these settings.
I'm guilty of that myself, honestly.
Most people are. And this is where we pivot to the reactive approach. What happens if no prior preferences are set in the system? And this is where the logistical burden shifts entirely and heavily onto the shoulders of the grieving family.
And that reactive scenario is the reality that plays out 99% of the time, isn't it? Most people do not have this set up.
Unfortunately, yes.
So someone passes away, their account is just sitting there active, and the family members have to step in and request the platform to either memorialize or delete it. But they can't just send a polite email to customer service asking for a favor.
No, the platform requires official, legal documentation.
We're talking about the family having to source and submit undeniable proof of death, like a published obituary or a legally issued notarized death certificate.
Which takes time to get.
And on top of that hurdle, the platform requires verification of the requester's relationship to the deceased. The sibling or the spouse has to actively prove to a tech company that they have the legal right to even make this request in the first place.
This is a massive and often deeply frustrating friction point for families. Think about the reality of what is happening. The family is already trying to navigate the overwhelming, crushing bureaucracy of physical death.
Oh, it's a nightmare. They're arranging funerals. They're trying to settle complex physical estates.
They're dealing with banks and life insurance companies, fielding phone calls from relatives. And now, on top of all of that, they have to scan and submit legal documentation to a social media conglomerate's portal and wait for a moderation team to review it.
It's an incredibly heavy administrative burden placed on people during a period of acute, paralyzing grief.
It truly is.
Which brings us to the trap. There's a massive, incredibly common trap here that people fall into because they think they're taking a shortcut. I think this is the single most important technical detail for anyone listening today.
I agree.
Crucially, logging into a deceased person's account, using their actual credentials, using their username and password is a strict, absolute violation of the platform's terms of service.
Yes, that is an absolute, non-negotiable red line for the platform architecture.
Let's pause and really sit with this for a minute. So what does this all mean? I want to ask you, the listener, directly. Are you guilty of this?
A lot of people are.
Have you just written down all your passwords on a sticky note and hidden it under your keyboard, or maybe saved them all in a shared note app on your phone, and you just assume that if anything ever happens to you, your spouse or your kids will just grab the sticky note, log in, post a nice final message, and handle it?
The sticky note strategy.
Because according to the reality of the platform's architecture, that sticky note strategy is officially a terms of service violation. Even if you gave them explicit permission while you're alive, the literal second you pass away, them using your password to access your account breaks the rules.
It does.
And I can imagine people listening to this are thinking, who cares if it breaks the rules? The person is gone, the spouse has the password, what's the big deal?
It's a very common reaction, but it stems from a profound misunderstanding of how digital property and platform security actually operate. People intuitively assume that because they possess the password, they possess the right of access.
It feels like holding the physical key to a house.
Exactly. But a social media account does not belong to you in the way a physical house belongs to you. The server space and the underlying code belong to the platform. And you, the user, are merely granted a temporary license to utilize it under specific conditions.
Ah, okay.
When the primary user dies, that specific license terminates. It does not automatically legally transfer to the spouse holding a yellow sticky note.
But how does the platform even know? I mean, if my spouse logs in from my home computer, how does Facebook know I'm not the one typing?
Often they don't know immediately. But the platform's automated security systems are constantly monitoring for anomalous behavior.
Like what?
If an account suddenly logs in from a new device, or if the system eventually detects an obituary linked to that name while the account is still showing active logins, it triggers security protocols.
Oh, wow.
The system does not possess human empathy. It doesn't know that the person logging in from a new IP address is a grieving widow simply trying to post funeral arrangements. To the automated security algorithm, it looks completely identical to a malicious hacker gaining unauthorized access to a dormant account.
And the platform's mandate is to shut down unauthorized access immediately.
Exactly. If the platform detects that a third party, even a spouse, has logged in, they can and will lock the account down completely. They will freeze it.
That's brutal.
And suddenly, that shortcut the family thought they were taking becomes a nightmare, because now they are locked out, the account is flagged for suspicious activity, and they still have to go through the official channels to prove who they are, but now they are doing it from a penalized position.
That makes total sense from a macro security standpoint, even if it feels incredibly cold and robotic to a grieving family trying to do the right thing.
The administrative reality is that platforms must mandate these official bureaucratic channels. They require death certificates and relationship verification because digital identity theft, malicious reporting, and account hijacking are very real, everyday threats at scale.
I guess I didn't think about the malicious side of it.
Imagine the absolute chaos if the system was built on the honor system. Imagine if anyone can report an account as deceased without providing hard proof, effectively deleting someone's digital life as a prank or an act of revenge.
Oh, that would be terrible.
Or imagine a scenario where a family is deeply divided. One estranged family member uses an old password to log in and aggressively deletes the account out of spite, completely against the wishes of the parents who desperately wanted to memorialize the photos.
Oh, that's a chilling thought. A family war over a digital estate.
It happens. The strict terms of service, the absolute ban on password sharing, and the inflexible requirement for legal documentation are not there to punish grieving families. They're designed as a firewall to protect the user's legacy from unauthorized tampering. It is bureaucratic, yes, it is slow, yes, but it is a highly necessary protective bureaucracy. It ensures that the final state of the account, whether memorialized or deleted, is handled securely and legally.
That is a really sobering, important perspective. The bureaucracy is a shield. It stops someone with a grudge and your old iPad password from deleting your digital life's work or hijacking your identity.
Exactly.
So you have to go through the official channels, you have to submit the documentation, you have to wait for the platform's moderation team to verify the death certificate and finally flip the switch to memorialized or deleted. It is a grueling process for the reactive family.
It is.
But all of these strict rules, all of these automated systems and logistical hurdles really bring us back to the fundamentally human element at the core of all this. Why do we go through all this trouble in the first place? Why does it matter so much to us?
We go through the trouble, we endure the bureaucracy,
Yeah.
because these digital spaces have become absolutely fundamental to how modern humans process loss. The analysis provided by the funeral program site highlights this intersection perfectly by focusing on the emotional considerations and the rapidly shifting cultural attitudes toward digital remembrance.
And the insights from their work show that the decision between memorialization and dilution depends heavily on these deeply ingrained personal preferences and cultural attitudes.
Very much so.
We talked about how some families find deep, sustaining comfort in keeping the account active, having that specific, curated place to visit on birthdays or anniversaries, a place to see the person's face and read their old jokes, and others just desperately need the absolute closure of deletion.
Right.
But what I found really fascinating, what really stood out to me when looking at the broader landscape, was the fact that resources like the funeral program site are actively having to integrate this into traditional planning.
Yes, that is a very telling indicator of where society is headed. The funeral program site is a resource dedicated to the physical artifacts of mourning, the printed programs, the prayer cards, the tangible items you hold in a church or a funeral home.
The physical anchors.
But they are actively helping families integrate these new digital elements like social media tributes and memorial pages into their overall traditional memorial planning.
It proves that the funeral industry itself, which is one of the oldest and most traditional industries on Earth, is adapting to this new reality in real time.
It has to.
They aren't treating a Facebook memorial as a weird side issue or a technological afterthought anymore. It is being viewed and treated as equally important and intricately connected to traditional printed materials like a funeral program or a published obituary.
It represents a profound synthesis of the physical and the digital. If you look at the sociological history of mourning, for centuries, mourning practices were strictly geographically bound.
You stayed in your town.
You gathered in the local village church, you buried the person in the local cemetery, and the mourning was confined to the people who could physically walk there.
Right.
Then, with the advent of mass media and the printing press, mourning expanded to published newspaper obituaries, allowing a wider but still regional community to be informed of the loss.
Yeah.
Now, we have evolved to curated, permanent digital spaces that are globally accessible instantly. You can mourn a friend who lived 10,000 miles away in real time alongside their family.
The evolution of funerals is just mind-blowing when you frame it like that. From the localized village gathering to the regional newspaper to the globally accessible digital memorial.
It's a massive leap.
It's like the funeral planning industry is providing the map to help families bridge these totally different eras. They're saying, here is your beautiful, tangible, printed program for the physical service you are holding today, and right here on the back is the QR code or the digital link to the memorial page where the global community can continue to share stories and photos for decades after everyone has gone home from the cemetery.
That's a perfect synthesis.
It actively, intentionally integrates the digital presence into the heart of the traditional mourning ritual. It acknowledges that both spaces are equally valid places of grief.
This raises an important question,
Right.
one that is central to understanding our future. How will these cultural attitudes continue to shift as generations who have lived their entire documented lives online begin to age and pass away?
Wow, yeah.
We are currently dealing with the digital estates of people who adapted to the internet later in life. But what happens when the generation that has had every single milestone documented online since birth reaches the end of life?
That's a staggering amount of data.
The synthesis we are seeing now proves that managing online accounts after death is no longer a niche technological concern for the hyper-connected. It is an undeniable, fundamental pillar of modern end-of-life planning.
It really is.
The digital legacy is now universally recognized as being just as vital to honor, protect, and manage as the physical legacy of houses and heirlooms.
We've covered an incredible amount of ground today on a topic that, frankly, is vital for every single person listening to understand, even if it's uncomfortable to think about.
That's essential.
To summarize the core takeaways from our deep dive today, this massive digital infrastructure offers you two distinct, legally and practically separated paths for your digital afterlife.
The fork in the road.
Right. You can choose memorialization, which freezes your account in time, preserves your exact privacy settings in Amber, seals the login to protect your legacy, and allows a designated legacy contact to curate a digital space for your community to gather.
Or the alternative.
Or you can opt for total erasure through permanent deletion, wiping the slate clean, reclaiming your data from the servers, and ensuring no digital ghost remains.
And the most vital takeaway is the necessity of making this choice proactively.
Yes.
Please do this.
By going into your settings and making these decisions while you are able, you save your grieving family from a nightmare of red tape. You prevent them from inadvertently committing terms of service violations by using old passwords on sticky notes, and you completely lift the crushing burden of having to track down, scan, and submit legal death certificates to massive tech companies while they are simply trying to mourn your loss. Exactly. You are giving them a profound gift by handling the administration yourself right now.
It's an act of love, really.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought to really mull over. We spent a lot of time discussing the idea of the legacy contact, curating the museum of your life, and the platform freezing your history in amber.
As you scroll through your feed today, as you look at the photos you've uploaded, as you read the comments you've left, and as you think about the private messages sitting in your inbox, ask yourself this. If time stopped and this profile were to become your permanent, unchangeable digital monument tomorrow, exactly as it is right now, what story would it tell to the world? And perhaps more importantly, knowing the limitations and the responsibilities involved, who have you trusted with the keys to the front gate of that museum?
What a powerful, slightly terrifying thought. What story is locked inside? And who holds the keys to the gate? It really brings it all back to that initial contrast we started with, the stark difference between quietly passing down a physical box of photos to your children and leaving behind a vast, invisible, globally accessible digital estate.
It's a new world.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Do not let this just be an interesting philosophical conversation you listen to on your commute. Take the shortcut to being well-informed and actually go check your account settings today. Take the 5 minutes to give your family that peace of mind. We will catch you on the next one.